For the light of your love is shining in the midst of the darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow. Flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me this morning on Let the Bible Speak. My name is Alex Meredith. I am the minister for the Church of Christ in Marquette. I hope you are having a wonderful week, and I hope you have a wonderful week this coming week. If you don't have a Bible with you, go ahead and grab one, whether you need to do that on a computer or you've got a paper copy like this on your phone, a tablet. Whatever you need to do, go ahead and grab one because we've got something really important to talk about today. Now, the first thing that I want to do is actually show you this bottle. I'm not sure, because we've got this office set up here, I'm not sure how well this camera is going to pick this up. But I'm going to try to show you this bottle best I can. And I want you to take a guess at what you think is inside this bottle. That liquid that you see inside there. What do you think is inside this bottle? Take a guess. Just keep it in your head. Write it down somewhere if you've already got a pen or pencil out. Just take a guess at what's inside here. It might surprise you. Okay, so keep that in the back of your head there. Now, I grew up, at least in part, on the outskirts of Atlanta, outside the perimeter. And the important part of what I'm telling you is that I learned to drive around Atlanta. So I am used to the sort of hectic, chaotic, 24/7 rush hour kind of traffic. At least I used to be. And so I feel like now that I've learned to drive there, I can drive just about anywhere I want because nothing can really compete unless you're back in one of those cities again, like Chicago or New York, something like that. So anyway, I learned to drive under these really hectic conditions, and so when I tell a story like I'm about to tell, I can relate because there are a lot of reckless and dangerous drivers out there, even angry drivers out there. So there was an elderly woman driving down the interstate, and it was one of those places on the interstate where there are 4 or 5 lanes. It's 4 or 5 lanes wide. And she's over on the right side in one of the right 2 lanes. And the person in front of her is going a bit slow, so she wants to pass them. So, like she should, she looks in her side mirror. She even looks out the back to see her blind spot to make sure that there's nothing there. Turns on her turn signal. That's amazing, right? Turns on her turn signal. I shouldn't use sarcasm, I'm sorry. Turns on her turn signal and gets over. And little did she know that right before she got over, a big red pickup truck, a few cars behind her, had gotten over it and was trying to speed past everyone. So when she got over, she actually cut off this big pickup truck. She didn't mean to, but that's what happened. So she cut him off. And the driver of this pickup truck was less than thrilled about that. He gets over quickly, 1 lane over to the left, speeds up, gets right beside her, rolls his window down, makes a few gestures, yells a few names, and then speeds up and cuts her off. Well, this woman didn't mean to do anything. She didn't mean any harm, right? So she's a little shaken, but then the pickup truck cuts her off and she sees the back of his truck and she decides that she needs to call the police. But it's not because of what he did. It's not because of the names that he called her or because of the gestures that he made at her or because he was driving dangerously, She called the police because she figured out that the car must be stolen. You know how she figured that out? Because as soon as the pickup truck got over, she could see the whole back bumper was littered with bumper stickers. Bumper stickers like, Jesus loves you, and Jesus is the only way. God is all I need. All these Christian bumper stickers, and so she came to the reasonable conclusion, this truck must be stolen. There's no way this truck can belong to a Christian, right? There's no way. Something doesn't add up. The truth is, who people claim to be does not always line up with who they are, right? Who people claim to be does not always line up with who they are. And the man that we hear about in this story, he was quite literally a bumper sticker Christian. Christian by name only, but not by action. At least, not in that moment, right? You've probably met a few bumper sticker Christians in your life, in your walk as a Christian, maybe. You probably know a few bumper sticker Christians, or at least have run into them. And bumper sticker Christianity which is really hypocrisy, bumper sticker Christianity is a serious problem in the church, right? It leads to this false sense of security. It is a misportrayal of Christ and of Christianity. It discredits one's ability, really all of Christendom's ability, to bear witness to the gospel. I mean, if they know that you're living a life doing X, Y, and Z, and you're telling them you need to be doing A, B, and C, and not X, Y, and Z, you can see how that they're not going to take you seriously because they don't think that you are taking the gospel seriously. So, a bumper sticker Christianity is rooted in a misunderstanding of what religion is. It has permeated the church, I think, and it is rooted in this misunderstanding of what religion is, and specifically of what Christianity should look like. So, when I'm talking about bumper sticker Christianity, I mentioned it a moment ago, I'm really talking about hypocrisy. Claiming to be one thing but actually being another. Telling others you need to not do something and then doing it yourself, or telling them you need to do something and not doing it yourself. It's hypocrisy, and God doesn't like hypocrisy. In fact, I want to show you Jesus' words that he spoke to the Pharisees and the scribes in Matthew chapter 15. And he says in verses 8 and 9, quoting from the prophets, he says, "This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." So you have people that honor God with their lips. They say that they are God's people. They act as if they are God's people. They want other people to know that they are God's people. But something about the way that they're living demonstrates to God that their hearts are far, far from Him, right? Their hearts are far from Him. That's hypocrisy in a nutshell. And when James, the book, the writer of the book in the New Testament, he writes to first century Christians who are undergoing a lot of problems. In fact, towards the beginning of the book, it's clear that he is addressing these people who were in exile. And that did happen in the first century church. You had several people that were displaced from their homes, displaced from their homelands, because of a lot of the persecution that was going on. They were forced to leave. This happened in Rome after the Great Roman Fire under the rule of Nero. You have this happening even in the areas of Jerusalem, especially after the Judeo-Roman War, the first Judeo-Roman War in 70 AD. You have this dispersion of Christians all over the place, removed from their homes. Now, this created a bit of a unique situation, which didn't turn out too well, according to James. Because what James is observing in the church is you have all these people who've been displaced from their homes, and as a result, resources are very scarce. They weren't able to earn money like they did. They aren't able to access resources like food as easily as they used to be able to. And so now there's a scarcity of these resources, and you see, or rather he sees, that these resources are being given only to certain people. There's a bit of favoritism going on here, and there's a bit of neglect going on here. There are some people being neglected in the daily distribution of the food. You have people who, on top of this, there's this false teaching spreading around about God's grace, that because God is gracious through Jesus Christ, it doesn't really matter how you live, right? And Paul, several times in the New Testament, addresses this teaching, telling people this is false, this is not true, this is not correct. God cares how you live, even as a Christian, especially as a Christian. Now, all that being said, all of these problems compounded on top of one another led to this state where, as James is looking at the church, he sees, as he describes in chapter 1, verse 21, rampant wickedness. Rampant wickedness. In other words, there were a lot of Christians in the first century church that were claiming to be Christians, but they weren't really living as Christians. They weren't really acting very Christian. I want you to listen to James's advice to these bumper sticker Christians. In James chapter 1, beginning in verse 19, listen to his advice to them. Know this, my beloved brothers. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Therefore put away all filthiness and rampant wickedness, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your souls. But be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. But to one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. There's a lot of content there, right? And we see that in this passage, the problem is pretty much summed up in verse 22. Be doers of the word, not hearers only. The thing is, these Christians in the first century, they knew what was right. They knew how they were supposed to live, but apparently they weren't doing it. They weren't carrying it out, right? They weren't carrying it out. And in verse 27, we already talked about the problem. It's hypocrisy, basically. And in verse 27, James provides a solution, which is religion. But not just any sort of religion. What he calls a pure and undefiled religion. This is how to cure hypocrisy. He says in verse 27, just as a reminder, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. I think that's a pretty good summary of that whole passage. Avoid sin and do good, right? Avoid the bad, do the good. I think we learned three very important things about religion from this passage. I want to go over each of these because I think they're all very important. As James describes what religion ought to look like, these are the three things that we learn. Number one, we learn that religion is active. Religion is active. Religion is not just about belief. I don't think many people are under this impression, but I think increasingly we live in a culture where this is the somewhat of the understanding. That religion is just something on the side. It's not really an integral part of life. It's just something that you believe, but it doesn't really affect you, right? Well, no, that's not the case. Religion is active. It's not just belief. That's why in verse 22, James urges them, don't just know the right thing, do the right thing. It should affect your life. In fact, the word that is used for religion, if I have my research done correctly, the word proskeia is a Greek word for religion, proskeia, which is heavily related in root and form to the word proskuneo. Proskeia and proskuneo. The first of which means religion, the second of which means worship. Well, what do you make of that? I may be digging too much into this, that is possible, but to me, when I see a heavy relation like that, it seems like the two are tied together. Worship is an expected part of religion. If you are religious, that is, if you believe something, you are going to therefore act on it. You are going to act in accordance with those beliefs. Your life is going to look different as a result of those beliefs. You are going to worship in accordance with those beliefs. James Rogers, when he was commenting on this passage in James, he said, religion that is worth something is religion that is doing something. Think about that. Religion that is worth something is religion that is doing something. Later on in James, we have a very good picture of what active religion looks like. In chapter 2, verses 14 and following, listen to this. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. So if you want to know what true faith looks like, if you want to know what true religion looks like, go to James, right there in chapter 2. It is an active matter. Religion is active. It involves doing something. It's not just belief. It doesn't stop there. It is a lifestyle. It's not something that comes and goes at will. It is a lifestyle. It's a choice. So religion is active. Number 2, religion cares for the helpless. Religion cares for the helpless. Really, this is tied in with the first one. Because if we're saying that religion is active, this is part of that activity, caring for the helpless. And you notice in James chapter 1, he specifically brings up orphans and widows. Now, orphans and widows in the ancient world were by far the most vulnerable of the entire population. As far as orphans go and widows go, the situation that you typically had was if they didn't have other people in their life that were willing to directly look after them and directly provide for them, most of the time, especially the orphans, they had no means to make money for themselves. It wasn't like today where a woman could go out and easily get a job. You had a huge barrier there, and typically widows were left, it was hoped, with a significant inheritance from their husband or from another family member, or another family member would sort of take them in and watch after them. But if they had nobody else in their life that lived nearby, they were on their own. And they were totally at the mercy of the community in which they lived. This is why you have so much talk in the Bible about widows and orphans, because they are totally vulnerable, right? And what's so surprising about this call to me too, and I think this really deserves some reflection, when he talks about orphans and widows and caring for them, these are people who cannot give you anything in return. They cannot give you anything in return. And so he says we ought to do this without an expectation of I'm doing this and then you'll owe me one. It's I'm just doing this because it's the right thing to do. True religion is best seen when the church chooses to love people who have absolutely nothing to give back. Another passage that's important here, I think, is Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 through 47. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. And this is really where it kicks in, I think. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even Gentiles do the same? What a difficult calling, right? What a difficult calling. Religion is active. Religion cares for the helpless. And finally, religion is unstained by sin. If you read the book of Romans, I think you will very quickly get the impression that if you are baptized into Christ, you are expected to live a changed life. I bring that up because on our Wednesday night classes right now, we're doing this study of Romans, which, by the way, if you want to be involved in, feel free to let me know. We're, at the moment, doing them online, so even if you're far away, you can participate. But as we go to the book of Romans, it is abundantly clear. Paul makes this huge argument about how in Christ, in baptism, you have been set free from sin. Why would you want to go back there? You weren't getting anything out of it. It's not a good place to be. And God calls us to be holy as he is holy, right? And so religion is unstained by sin. And the world's way, by the way, does not always line up with God's way. I'm sure you know this. The world's way does not always line up with God's way. So make sure to allow the Word of God to be your guide. Don't allow the world to tell you what's good and what's popular, and that what's popular is good, because that's not always the case. In fact, it's often not. Christianity demands a pursuit of holiness. This is why in James chapter 1, as he talks about pure and undefiled religion, he says things about how true religion means that you are slow to anger. It means that you can control your tongue, right? It means that you are impartial. You're not playing favorites. Chapter 2, verse 1 deals with that issue. You have all of these aspects of Christianity that once you become a part of this body, your life ought to change. This is demonstrated well, I think, in Ephesians chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. Listen to this. Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love, as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure, or who is covetous, that is, an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ or God. A life in Christ demands change. So I think we see that Christianity, religion is not just a worldview. It's not just a certain way of thinking about things. It is that. But it is also a complete and total change. It is a lifestyle. It is a choice to live in the grace of God and to demonstrate the grace of God to every single person around you. It permeates your life. It is a part of who you are. Which is why, bottom line, people ought to be able to tell that you are Christian. Not because you flaunt it, but because the fruits which come from you prove it. They show it. right? Your love should be noticeable. They will know that you are Christians by your love for one another. Your purity should be noticeable. You are a light set up on a hill that cannot be hidden. Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. If you are a Christian, the world ought to be able to tell. So as we conclude, I'll show you once again this Coke bottle. I think you can see it's a bottle on the outside. It says Coca-Cola. What do you think is on the inside? It's Coca-Cola. It wasn't really a trick question, sort of. But it's Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is what's on the inside of this bottle. You can see it bubbling there. And how did you know that? Because the outside of the bottle told you about something that's on the inside. So when people see you, when people see the outside, what do they assume is on the inside? Do they assume it's Christ? Or is it just another bumper sticker Christian? A message to those who are on the fence of Christianity, by the way. Don't let the unfaithfulness of a few bumper sticker Christians distract you from the fact that God is always, has always been, and will always be faithful. The faithfulness of Christians does not change the faithfulness of God. We are out of time. Once again, I want to remind you of the Bible course that we offer. We continue a series of workbooks. If you want to participate in that, let us know. We offer you a Bible as well, free of charge. All of this, no charge to you. The contact information is up on the screen. Just let us know that you need it. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great week. God bless.
The Father's glory blaze, Spirit blaze, set our hearts on fire. Flow, river flow, flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be